Before listening to this show, you should watch Chapter One of The Mandalorian on Disney+. The sound quality of this Galactic Initiative episode will not impress you, but I hope the content will offset any technical issues. Enjoy.
I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold.
Hello, welcome to Galactic Initiative. I'm your host, Jeff. Today we discuss Chapter 101 of The Mandalorian.
Hello?
David?
Hello, my friend.
Sean? So the show opens on an ice planet. The name is Maldo Kreis, or Maldo Kreis. We have the Mandalorian on the hunt.
You get it's like a black screen, and you hear the beep. It's a very dramatic opening shot. Desolate planet, wind, the Mandalorian, and you have this. You're not really sure yet what the beeping sound is until you see the fob. You're immediately captivated by that. You have to know what's going to happen next. You want to know. You're totally drawn in. And it's 28 seconds into the episode? It's fantastic.
The cantina door spirals open. There's the Mandalorian coming out of the snow and strolls to the bar, doesn't acknowledge the harassment that begins. The human who is the instigator, he actually spills his own drink when he stands up to take out his knife to carve up the mithril. So his whole premise of accusing the Mandalorian of spilling the drink is nonsense. Interesting choice to have the mithril speak perfect basic, but the human to speak Huttese. I thought that was interesting.
It is, but it's also it just shows we're in this lawless space, and we're dealing with obviously dudes that are willing to carve up another dude for his musk, and it's a pretense for a fight. These guys want to fight, they want to hurt some people, and I think that the spilling of the drink thing is just a pretext to engage the Mandalorian in a physical altercation. I don't think that anybody was ever really worried about the drink.
It's basically just I'm a tough guy and I want to fight. And also wanted to come over and take a little bit closer look at the Mandalorian's gear, because he asked specifically, "Is that Beskar steel?"
And still fights.
Doesn't know anything about Mandalorians. I mean, yes, the steel would be a bigger mark than the Mithril's musk, but also a much more difficult target.
Yeah, but when you're the big tough guy, what does it matter? I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're dealing potentially with a Mandalorian or a Sith Lord or whoever.
Quick but very cool fight scene. We're going to see the Mando use his wrist lasso. We're going to find out that even though his armor isn't Beskar steel, it is blaster resistant.
I don't think we've ever seen anything like this gruesome, where a person basically just gets cut in two by a door. Kind of sets the tone for the rest of the series and the show.
Well, it's a style choice by the Mando, because the Quarren draws his blaster, fires, actually hits the Mando, and then the Mando draws his pistol, and you think he's going to blast the Quarren. Oh no. He blasts the door control.
Yep.
He could have shot the Quarren.
It's hardcore,
This is an intentional choice. This is not an accident.
Yeah, he's making an example of
it. Yeah,
what
do the people in the bar think after this? Like, oh my gosh.
They're going to talk about that for a long time.
Yep.
The physicality of the bar fight, the breaking the glass over the guy's head. I mean, that's so in line with every Western and every bar fight we've ever seen in film, but it's just that extra moment, like you say, cutting the guy in half in the door and all that kind of stuff. It just establishes the Mando as a hard dude. It's a more intimate or more intense violence than we've seen in Star Wars. Definitely shows that, it's a high risk, high reward profession to be involved in the Star Wars universe.
We also learn quickly that the Mandalorian is a man of few words. He approaches the Mithril, and the Mithril basically has a conversation with himself about collecting his credits. No, you take the credits, buy a drink, and he's talking to the Mandalorian, even though the Mandalorian has no reaction, and the first words we hear from him are, "I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold," as he puts his hand on his pistol, and then the logo for the show, and we've officially begun.
classic Western.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, it's not a 1-to-1 correlation, but it's
Right.
very close. It really apes a lot of the tropes that we see in the traditional American Western film of the lone gunman arriving in town and coming into the bar, and when he walks up to the bar and everybody's staring at him and giving him grief and he's trying to order a drink, and then it turns into some big throwdown where he has to establish his authority and power over everyone.
He doesn't like droids. The first taxi is refused. The Mandalorian says no droids. The second taxi summoned is a beater, but it has a human driver, so it's acceptable.
I laughed out loud when the guy pulls up with the next speeder and it's smoking and it's like one of the engines catches on fire, and when he actually pulls up and stops, there's like a pipe or a piece of it drops off the bottom and hits the ice. And it's funny because he pays the dude extra to summon a vehicle that doesn't have a robot, or a droid in it, and we get this falling apart piece of junk.
Yeah, because we all have to go to jail in style. You know what I mean?
Well, to be honest, to be honest about that, it's funny because we don't really know what the bounty is for, right? We drop the puck. We know this guy's wanted. Mando's bringing him in. We don't know what his crime was that deserves a bounty. So clearly he's a man of means because he keeps offering all this money to everybody. He talks about renting a ship or calling in a different ship and all that stuff. But it's, going to jail in style is, that's funny.
The Mando, the Mithril, they take the taxi to the Mando ship, the Razor Crest. Their driver is looking through binoculars at the ice. He's looking for Ravanax, and this will set up the sea creature that will actually take down the taxi after they've left it. But let's talk about the ship first. Sorry. So the Mithril's reaction to the Mando ship is disbelief. Aesthetically, what did you think of the ship?
Cool design. I like the used look. Reminded me a little bit of Slave One, like a kind of like a snout, but not like an exact copy of it.
Yeah, I love the ship. I think it's great. It does, yeah. There's obviously some connections to Slave One. I know that Filoni and the guys were talking about how with the ramp on the back and things like that, they tried to tie it in a little bit to Slave One, but it was almost like an homage in a way to Grievous's fighter, which was an homage to a World War II fighter plane. It almost felt like a World War II bomber. Another one of these visual cues, it brings in the prequel era because it's supposed to be pre-Empire. It's tying in all of the design aesthetics. I mean, it's a stainless steel ship. We haven't seen one that's shiny like that since Amidala's cruiser. But it's again unique and specific to the Mando, and I think I think it's cool. I really like it. I enjoy it.
Yeah, the comparison to Slave One, I don't see it, but those are two larger ships, significantly larger than fighter aircraft. So even though these bounty hunters travel alone, they need holding cells, they need weapons. There's a lot of equipment that comes with the job. There's a lot of necessities. So before they can board, the Mandalorian pulls the Mithril out of the way just as the Ravenek bursts through the ice and grabs one of the landing skids, which prevents them from leaving. And now we have a great callback, Ambin phase pulse blaster rifle. Talk about this weapon and how the Mandalorian uses it on the Ravenek.
Yeah, exactly. It's a nice, sweet callback to the holiday special, and uses it as a way to electrocute the beast and to allow for them to get out of there. And a lot of little tricks or like pieces of we find out a lot more of its use throughout the show. So it's pretty cool piece of weaponry.
He very much looks more like the Boba Fett from the holiday special than the Boba Fett that ultimately we got in Empire Strikes Back. Here in the first 15 minutes of this episode, we get Boba Fett's rifle, which was only in the holiday special that had the tuning fork on the end. And then we get the blue guy talking about how he was really hoping to get home to his family in time for Life Day this year, but it's not going to look like it's happened. So in this episode, we've now made canonical the holiday special that George Lucas has been trying to expunge from the record since it happened in 78 or whatever it was, 77. So the Mandalorians and the Mandalorian mythos that comes a lot out of the Clone Wars cartoon feels like it's separate from Boba Fett in a lot of ways, because Boba Fett was never connected to Mandalorians other than his armor. We never saw him interact with other people that look like him. He was a standalone character.
I'm surprised. I understand that there is a love for Star Wars between Filoni and Favreau. Knowing that Lucas is not such a hot fan of the holiday special, I mean, I know he even said he'd love to get all the tapes of that and just burn them. Why would you like purposely go and add all these little things? I know it's become like a cult classic and stuff like that, but the holiday special in itself,
there was clearly a feeling from Favreau, if not Filoni, that George would appreciate this particular callback. When George visited the set, Favreau was very excited and wanted to show him the phase pulse rifle, and Lucas didn't want to see it. He didn't want to hold it.
Yeah,
he didn't want, and I think it's only then, I think it's at that moment right there when he visits the set that they realize he doesn't like anything about the holiday special. It's not a matter of, well, I like Boba Fett, I didn't like the rest. He doesn't like anything about the holiday special. So I think it was done as a tribute and a really important connection to the past, and unfortunately it just doesn't resonate with Lucas himself. It's kind of sad.
You would think, like, even though we all know that George has been very vocal about his displeasure over the holiday special, and then he's often said, I had nothing to do with that, it was made, we licensed it and they went out and did it and we didn't really think about it, but he clearly greenlit the fact that, okay, there's the portion of the holiday special that's worthy of moving forward in the film canon is Boba Fett. I mean, it's perfectly understandable to see why Favreau and Filoni would be excited about it and to show it to him and being like, hey, look, we're kind of winking at this thing, but we're also really not, we're not bringing back B. Arthur or anything like that. We're giving you the blaster and Boba Fett, right? But this, like you say, I mean, the fact that the Lucas is still to this day, even after having sold Star Wars, like saying, I don't like that. That's not my Star Wars. I don't accept that or condone that or whatever. And it's like, dude, it's half of, it's Boba Fett. It's basically Boba Fett. I'm giving you Boba Fett. And he's like, I still don't like it. It's hilarious. Favreau joked about being the younger brother that got all the bad action figures when you were a kid, and you had to play with Squid Face and Prune Face, and you didn't get the you didn't get the Stormtrooper. You got all the garbage figures, right? The Bespin guards and the Cloud Car pilots and stuff, and you had to make up your own
thing.
How
dare you, sir? How dare you?
Oh, that's awesome. But he talks about that. Like, we took all the broken pieces and all of the, the surrounding characters, the background characters that weren't cool in Star Wars, and we're bringing all this stuff together, and we're putting it together to make a Star Wars show out of it. They're not trying to just shine the light on the good stuff or the best stuff in Star Wars. They're giving you all of it.
Which again goes back to the surprise. Filoni, you'd think of all people would know that and keep it out. So just like I said, it kind of surprised me.
Yeah, and I won't forget the shot you just took at the Cloud Car pilot. So the two of you, you're on the bad list right now. After the escape from the ice planet, the escape from the Ravenak, the Mythrol excuses himself to use the vac tube, finds three characters frozen in carbonite, mentions Life Day. The Mando grabs him and throws him into the carbon freeze chamber. And obviously technology's advanced, and word about Han Solo's capture's gotten out, because you have a bounty hunter using a carbon freeze chamber on his targets. Very cool.
So we actually see our first ever Star Wars toilet. But the technology has advanced so much that you don't need a huge, carbon freezing chamber like they showed in Empire Strikes Back.
Technology is technology. It advances at a certain rate. Once, like you say, once word gets out from Boba Fett using it, I'm sure somebody somewhere figured out a way to make the technology smaller and put it in the ship. But the whole thing, David's right. I mean, we've seen many other excuses and many other ploys and other things in science fiction films to get away from the bad guy or get away from the the situation, but the bathroom one has never been used yet. And so one, that was interesting too. It was interesting to actually see it. 3, I share everyone's confusion and concern as to why the guy didn't grab a gun, though this guy probably realizes that in any fight he's not going to beat the Mando, and he is cuffed, so he's probably doing some calculus there. He's figuring out where everything is on the ship, and maybe he's planning for a future escape or trying to figure out a way, to get away, like maybe when they land somewhere or whatnot. Again, we learn more about the Mando. He's not an idiot. He doesn't talk. He doesn't say a lot, but letting this guy roam around his ship was never really the plan. Who's playing who in that moment. But it was another very, very well done, well executed moment in the show.
Yeah, in such a short period of time to have all these callbacks, and Easter eggs, and connections, you feel as a Star Wars fan, as a really committed Star Wars fan, you feel very happy and welcomed by the show. Like, hey, someone gets it. Someone out there gets it, and they've read the comics and they've watched the holiday special, and they love Star Wars as much as me. So it's a great feeling.
I consider myself a pretty strong Star Wars fan, and there's things in this show that I'm being told by other Star Wars fans. Like you say, like I didn't know about the Easter egg thing about the frozen, the other frozen bounties. And this goes to something that that Favreau had said in an interview, and I don't know if it was on the behind the scenes show or if it was in another interview that he did with a different media outlet, but basically talking about the fans and trying to make something that resonates with all of the fans. And we've now seen here, we're not even a third of the way through the episode at this point, and we've seen prequel references, comic book references, cartoon references, the disavowed and disallowed holiday special references, plus the original trilogy and all these things. It's like, it's so layered, and it's nuanced too. There's the people who are just the hardcore movie fans, and the expanded universe people, and the novel people, and the and people who play the collectible card game. They're probably getting serviced in this too, and we have no idea, right? But all the things that we've talked about is stuff that we've pulled out and recognized from our fandom and how we engage with Star Wars. And there's other people who are pulling out other things as well, because everybody is being included, and it's just on every level. And it can be something as simple as the thing sitting on the shelf behind the guy in the bar, but there's some fan out there somewhere that says, "Oh my God, that's my favorite thing ever from the expanded universe," and you managed to get it in the show. And so that's why everybody's just loving on this nonstop.
So you mentioned the landing. The Mando will go to Navarro, a planet which will host most of the action in this series. Visits Grief Karga, who runs the Bounty Hunters Guild, or represents the Bounty Hunters Guild in this sector, in this area of the Outer Rim. There's a negotiation. The Mando throws down tracking fobs. He's caught all of his targets. He wants calamari currency, and this is the currency of the Mon calamari, so Admiral Akbar and his crew. And then he wants more work. In fact, he wants all of Grief Karga's tracking fobs. Grief says, slow down. I can't give all of these to you. And then Grief Karga says, well, there is one job, and that piques the Mando's curiosity. He asks for the puck. There's no puck. It's face-to-face, direct commission, deep pocket. The Mando asks if it's underworld. Greef does not answer that question. The Mando takes the chit and he goes to this back alley that has the same door security as Jabba's palace. Again, another awesome callback.
Well, this whole scene is fascinating, on a lot of different levels. I mean, we are getting a very subtle commentary on what the galaxy looks like after the Empire has been toppled, right? There was an order to things, and there was a way to do things, even in bounty hunting, right? We have the guild. You can't collect. From what you infer from just this brief interaction between Karga and the Mando is there is a guild. So there is a bounty hunting union that you have to be a member of, okay, and you have to follow certain protocols. This is like an actual regulated process. That's either breaking down now that the Empire is gone and we're in a time of this post-Empire New Republic era, or perhaps types of bounties are disappearing because of the end of the Empire. It's a really it's just a couple of lines between the guys. We established that the Mando is the best in the business, and that he's fast, because the surprise was not that Karga's surprise was not that the Mando got all four. He's like, "You're back already?" And he's like, "Yeah, I got all your people. They're right here. Let's go." And then the whole thing about the money, does the Mando not want to take the Imperial credits? He's using the excuse of them not being as spendable as they used to be, but is he not taking the Imperial credits because of the relationship between the Mandalorian people and the Empire and what has happened with the Great Purge and all that stuff? Is that blood money that he's not willing to take? And I know he wants, these jobs, and he wants to make money, but at the same time, we're starting to see that not only is he very good, not only is he lethal, not only is he, driven to achieve and to complete these bounties, but we're starting to see that he's a man of principle.
So the Mando goes on his way. I mentioned the security system from Jabba's palace. There's a gonk droid to greet him at the door, and the gonk droid takes him to the back room. Door slides open, and we see stormtroopers. Filthy stormtroopers, but stormtroopers. The client is played by Werner Herzog, who does, in my opinion, an excellent job. He is intriguing and somewhat ominous, mysterious, and he negotiates a deal with the Mando. There's not as much information as the Mando would like. There is a tracking fob, but they can only supply the last four digits to the chain code, which indicate the target's age. The payment is very interesting. He offers Beskar steel. So he produces a plate, says that he has a Camtono full of it, a call out to Wilro Hood from The Empire Strikes Back. So that's fun. And that's a significant amount of Beskar. So he's been waiting for the Mandalorian. I mean, yes, he tells you up front, Greef Karga said you were coming, said you were the best, said you were expensive. But again, there's this unsettling feeling that, like, this has been set up.
The introduction of the stormtroopers really, I'm not talking about like clone troopers or first order troopers. I'm talking about stormtroopers. When we get that, for me, that hit home. Like, yeah, this is awesome. Werner Herzog, I don't know a lot about the man, but the way he presented himself gave me a true sense that he had been entrenched in the Empire. Did an outstanding job and one of the best characters in this show.
I absolutely love Werner Herzog's character in this. Like, the lines that he has and the way he delivers them, like, he definitely comes across as what we have come to expect from menacing Imperial officers such as, Tarkin, Krennic, others, Thrawn. We have an Imperial scientist who's in a very similar outfit to Galen Erso and his Stardust team, the Imperial Science Division, and then Pershing is wearing glasses. Do we ever see that in Star Wars at that point?
No, I think that's the first one as well.
Yeah.
You got the toilet and the glasses.
Right. And so we've got this whole thing going on. We know there's something Imperial going on. And like Jeff said, all we're getting is the Mandalorian is brought into this moment to be offered this job. And he's basically given the deal that he can't refuse. He hates the Empire, but now he's being offered payment in the confiscated Beskar from his people. And he's been given an opportunity to bring this back, and even Herzog, this Imperial administrator, sort of in a way almost taunts him on the way out the door after he's accepted the job. He's like, "Oh, isn't it great that we're returning everything back to the natural order?" There's so many angles going on in that moment. It's just fantastic.
The thought of the Beskar being returned, because that's essentially what's happening. Yes, it's payment, but you're returning what rightfully belongs to the Mandalorians to them, but you're only doing it a little bit at a time, and you're holding it over their heads. None of this can sit well with the Mandalorian. He doesn't even respond as he leaves to the taunt about returning to the natural order of things. And maybe this is the answer to the question, well, why didn't Greef Karga give the Mandalorian more information before he handed over the chip? Well, this is probably the reason. If you tell the Mandalorian that it's an Imperial job, he's likely to not go and not have the meeting and not see the Beskar.
He is in this sort of moral quagmire where he is being told to do something that might not necessarily be wrong or against his moral code, but the nature of the client and the way he's being paid is definitely not what he wants or not what he's comfortable with. But if he had been told that in the bar by Karga, he probably never would have gone. He probably would have said, "I'll take all the claim jumpers or the bail jumpers, and you guys can deal with this other thing." But now that he's in the position, he's almost honor bound to accept it simply because he's been shown this Beskar. And this is a culturally significant thing to him and his people. This isn't just a job for money now. This is a job to reclaim some of your heritage, to reclaim a piece of your culture.
Yeah, and I think without seeing Pedro Pascal, I think his body language and his tone, his voice inflection communicates what you just eloquently summarized. And all this with a helmet over his face. So he has a down payment in Beskar, and his next stop will be the Mandalorian covert. We see other Mandalorians, right? Different armor. We see children with Mandalorian helmets running through these tunnels, like this sewer system. It looks like there's a furnace, and we see the Mythosaur skull, a silver Mythosaur skull logo, just like the Mythosaur skull painted onto Boba Fett's left shoulder pauldron. So this is very familiar. We've seen this. We've seen this in Expanded Universe, but now we're seeing it in a show. Very, very exciting. And this is the Armorer's Workshop. The Mandalorian produces the Beskar and the calamari flan. So he has some very valuable stuff that he's brought. The Armorer talks about knowing where the Beskar came from, seeing the Imperial cog logo and saying it's good that this is returning to the tribe. Has your signet been revealed? No. She determines what piece of armor to make and then goes about her work, and we get a flashback. So that's a lot. Talk to me about this scene in the Mandalorian covert.
Stuff like this gets you excited about Star Wars, gets you excited about little details that they put in to the show. The Beskar in the smelter, pretty cool how they were able to melt it down and then make it one of his, replace one of his pieces on his armor. In this case, it was a shoulder part. So as a Mandalorian / bounty hunter, they're trying to revitalize their culture. And this is one of the ways that, I guess giving back to their community.
There is a lot to unpack. I mean, of course, the Mythosaur skull, which is the ubiquitous symbol of the Mandalorian people, but it's also the conversation around the signet is also interesting because at some point you earn your own unique signet that is symbolic of some great trial or success that you have in combat. And one of the things I absolutely enjoy about this episode is that we get so much world building and so much history and so much backstory to a lot of things, and it's all handled in very subtle ways. There's children in there and they're wearing the helmets. The bringing things back into the tribe of the Mandalorians, bringing the Beskar back and bringing in this money that will help the people and all that stuff, and talking about how he was a foundling, which means he was some kind of orphan that was taken in by the Mandalorians, and how his work is going to benefit the foundlings, and then it's in this scene where we understand why the Mandalorian is constantly asking for more money jobs. We learn that he's not greedy. He's using it to feed his people and to keep them hidden, and to help, like David said, find the Beskar and restore the culture and bring things back in into the tribe, and putting himself at risk, a great risk in his job. And the other thing where he's talking to the smithy, is we see the Mandalorian culture and the Mandalorian people very much are like the ancient Spartans. They are a culture built, and we've learned this, also in the way they were portrayed in the Clone Wars and the Rebels cartoon. So they are a warrior culture, and they are a warrior class, and they believe in the honor of armed combat and the code of the warrior, and they have a very intense and tight tribal relationship with the people who are part of this culture, and the warrior class is there to provide and protect and to do all these things. So the reverential treatment and the elevated status of the smithy amongst this group of people, it very much is in line with that sort of ancient tradition. And also the signet thing reminds me of heraldry, again, in the age of chivalry, is that you are given a symbol to represent you and your family, or to the very least represent you, based on some kind of military success or some kind of feat of honor or great trial or challenge. And so while the Mando in this moment he's a great bounty hunter and he's a great warrior, he hasn't faced that challenge yet, to truly earn his symbol, to the thing that he can put on his shield when he goes into battle, so to speak. Like all these different facets that are being brought in and being used to build the mythos of the Mandalorian society and of the Mando's backstory himself, because we get the flashback of some great tragedy that happened to him, and we don't really see what it is, but we know it involves probably his parents. I mean, it's such a rich and deep moment, but we were given this massive look into what it means to actually be a real Mandalorian. It's fantastic.
I agree with those observations. You mentioned the foundlings and the Mandalorian sponsorship of the foundlings, and that brings us to his flashback. In the flashback, we see two adults, a woman and a man, running through a battle, and a boy being placed in a cellar. Switching gears, with the Empire gone, why is the covert still underground? So why not come out of hiding to rebuild the culture and reconnect all the Mandalorians scattered around the galaxy?
So we don't know exactly where this falls on the timeline. We know that that politically, people understand that the Empire is no longer in charge, but we don't know exactly how far along that process is. If this is right after the Battle of Yavin Battle of Endor and the destruction of the second Death Star, we know that it would be far enough into the rebellion, and it would be the big enough deal. You know, the Emperor is dead. The war is not fully over at that point. Yes, things are changing. Things are different in the universe. The Empire is not fully in control anymore. But do we know if this is a permanent political situation or is this in flux? Are they going to counterstrike? Are they going to destroy the rebellion? You know, is this war really over? We haven't been given a definitive, you know, moment, other than the fact that we know that there's significant Imperial forces that are still around and are still organized in such a way that they're following orders of various officers. And also, Mandalorians have had a bad relationship with everybody. If you go back and you look at, you know, the history of it that was given to us in the Clone Wars, yeah, they not only did they have a war with the Jedi, they've been fighting amongst themselves, and they've gone through multiple regime changes that included a brief flirtation with pacifism, you know, and Darth Maul showed up and took over and ran the place for a while and all this stuff. And then they were ultimately, after that civil war or that problem that they had internally, the Empire shows up and crushes them too. And, you know, now that these things may potentially be okay, you know, being a Mandalorian might be okay right now, they're not really sure.
Difficult question to answer, but yeah, we can move on. After the armorer crafts a new right pauldron for the Mandalorian, he flies to Arvala 7, a planet where his tracking fob and the last 4 digits of the chain code and information supplied by the client has led him. He's surprised by a blurg, and blurgs come from the Ewoks battle for Endor. That's where they started, but they show up in Rebels. They show up in the Clone Wars. They've been in a few places, but this is the first quality live-action blurg appearance. And anyway, one blurg surprises him and knocks him down. He tries to use his flamethrower, can't do it, and the Mando is rescued by an Ugnaught. He says, "I will help you. I have spoken," which becomes his catchphrase, and he takes the Mandalorian back to his home. It appears that he's a moisture farmer, because I see a lot of the same equipment that I saw at Luke's place on Tatooine. And he starts to talk to the Mandalorian about why he wants to help him and so on and so forth. So what are your impressions and feelings about this Ugnaught?
Love, you know, his facial expressions, his movement. I know how difficult it was for the lady in the costume to know the dialogue and have to react to it once the Mandalorian got back to his homestead, trying to learn how to be on a blurg. He kind of actually gives up, and the Ugnaught actually had to convince him, you know, hey, you are this great warrior. Why are you tripping over not being able to ride this thing? Get your butt back up on there and let's do this.
The Ugnaught is probably one of the best characters. He's an interesting dude. You know, he's a farmer of some kind. You know, some kind of homesteader out here. He gives a little talk later on in the episode about how the people who come to this planet are ones who seek peace and solitude, and all this stuff regarding this particular bounty has disrupted the balance. It's not that he likes the Mandalorian or that he's really all in with the Mandalorian and on his side, but he recognizes that the Mandalorian is potentially the answer to his problem, which is restoring peace and quiet. He has all the answers for the things that the Mando needs, but he had the answers for everybody who's shown up there looking, you know, for this particular, you know, target. It's interesting because he seems like he's almost more aware of the Mandalorian's history and culture than the Mando is. Or the Mando is so caught up in his single-minded pursuit that he sort of forgets who he is and what he's capable of. He's just like, dude, your people conquered the Mythosaur, which is way more crazy than this thing. This is like, this is a house pet compared to that. Like, you don't give up on me now. Don't be weak. And the fact that he says, I want half, and the Mando's like, half the reward, and he's like, no, I want like at least one of the blurgs because I need one to do my job here on the farm with, and you managed to let me bag two, so if I could just keep one of those for myself, and and then helping him out and understanding like, look, you can't just walk over there, you're gonna need a blurg to help you get you over the terrain, all this stuff. Like, he's a guide. It's still, you kind of get the transactional feeling like he's doing it because he knows that if he allows this little bit of Mando bounty hunter violence into his neighborhood for a minute, it's going to solve all of his other problems.
Well, he has a wisdom. There's a funny moment after they first meet when the Ugnaughts agreed to help the Mando, and he says that there have been others and he's helped them too, and they died. And the Mando says, well, I'm not sure that I want your help. And he says, oh, no, you do. You will. And he turns out to be of great help. So after learning how to ride a blurg with help from the Ugnaught, the two head off towards what the Ugnaught calls an encampment. It actually feels a little bit more like almost like a small town, doesn't it? Like a small edge of the world western town.
Yeah, I would agree.
It's some kind of, I mean, it almost, to go with the Western theme, it almost feels like a mission. It's bigger than what you would consider an encampment. It does feels more permanent than something that would be called an encampment, for sure.
Yeah. And through what transpires next, it's hard to know if the mercenaries at this place belong here. They are Nikto, which is an alien species. In Star Wars, we saw them at Jabba's palace, a few of them anyway. But this encampment is full of them, and perhaps they overran another group who initially built the encampment or owned it or what have you. But the Nikto are here now. The Mandalorian is looking at them through the scope of his rifle, trying to get a feel for what he's going to deal with. How many? Where are they? What is the security like? And before he can gather all that information through observation, a bounty droid appears. And this bounty droid is an IG unit. It's from the same series as IG-88, a bounty hunter we saw in The Empire Strikes Back. And this droid is not subtle and not quiet. It's not taking the time to gather information. It just marches up and starts a fight. And then the Mandalorian has to rush down and join the fight.
Oh, what's not to like about an IG? We've gone from Empire Strikes Back, where the IG-88 was just standing there chilling, the only thing that moved was his head. And even before that, he was part of the bar in A New Hope. And now we've got an IG-11 basically ready to take on the whole town, just kind of walking up like, either you give me my bounty or I'm just going to start taking you guys out. Love the fact that, we got to see it finally in action. I mean, we grow up, again with these toys, and we're always imagining, how it would move, how it would act. And here we've got a 360, not only the head, but the body, the torso is, moving all the way around and just taking people out. It was so cool.
Yeah, I thought he was great. I love the way that they finally showed. I mean, we saw a couple of them in Clone Wars. Yes, that was animated, but it's finally nice to see him in live action, see how that particular droid works. Because obviously the IG-88 that we got in Empire Strikes Back was window dressing. He just stood there and didn't move. And the personality is interesting. And of course, we get to see more of the Mandalorian and his problem with droids and how he doesn't like interacting with droids. But the bounty hunter guild protocol, he walks up to the facility and he starts, reciting this proclamation about how under the guild, I have the right to this asset, and you need to hand over the asset until you've been served. And then the whole running joke of him trying to self-destruct, which I thought was absolutely awesome and hilarious. And so the Mando is trying to not only kill bad guys, but he's also trying to convince the IG droid not to blow himself up in the process and all that. And that was a lot of fun too. But yeah, no, I think he's great.
Yeah, the self-destruct was a nice touch. A slave to its programming. It cannot be captured, so it will blow itself to pieces when the tide turns against it, rather than be captured and have information taken from it. And like you said, the whole interaction about the guild and the IG unit wants the merits for the mission. The Ugnaught says to the Mando, and we see the landscape, that the Mandalorian needed a blurg to get there, and yet the IG unit simply walks up to the encampment. So it's interesting. If you could ride the blurg to get to the encampment, why couldn't you fly your ship to the encampment and just land?
Yeah, that's a tough question, right? I mean, it's like you say, upon further review, the IG showing up in the moment that he showed up and how he showed up, we don't know. We don't see if he has a ship or not. That's never fully addressed. There's a sort of a desperation there going on with the Imperial Remnant that says, we don't care how many people we have to send after this. We're going to get this done one way or the other.
The IG unit was clearly sent by the guild. So if Grief Karga runs the guild in this area of space, and the IG unit is a guild member and sent by the guild, it's reasonable to assume that the contract came through Grief Karga, not a direct commission from the client to the droid. Right? If that were the case, you wouldn't think that the droid would be mentioning the guild in every line of dialogue. But it's interesting, right? And it's not clear from this episode. What is clear, though, is that the Mando and the droid have different priorities. We find out that the droid was tasked with terminating the asset. How did you like the E-Web blaster on the repulsor lift platform?
Well, before we get into that, I do want to go back to why he didn't fly his ship into the area. I think it's all about the element of surprise. Once he figured out where he landed, there was still a ways to go. Yeah, he could have easily got into his Razor Crest and flown over there and tried to get his job done. But I think, the way he did it, I mean, it definitely a stealthier way of doing things. Now going to the blaster, like we mentioned before, another nice, awesome callback. Love the rapid firing of it. That thing kicks some butt.
Like David said, another good callback to Empire Strikes Back. I thought that how the Mando, used IG-80 or IG-11 or whatever as a sort of almost as a decoy to draw the fire, so he could, knock the guy off the platform and shoot him, and then take the gun and use it against him. But it was great though, after that whole battle and after everything, like when they have that wide angle shot of all the dead mercenaries throughout the plaza and all that stuff, and the two of them standing there, and then they have the moment like, well, now how are we going to get to the blast door or whatever, and then like totally forgetting that they have this massive heavy weapon with them. Again, it was all very well done.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's easy to understand why the previous hunters failed. This is a heavily armed group of Nikto mercenaries, and they had a plan. When trouble arrived, they actually melted into the building, and then because it's a U shape, they actually came out on the other end to trap the Mando and IG-11 and brought out the heavy blaster. The Mando is is really good at his job. I mean, this is almost a hopeless situation. It's a situation that's snared and killed a lot of previous hunters, and he solves it.
Yeah, he solves it by teaming up, and bounty hunters, for the most part, go by themselves.
Right. Well, you bring in another hunter, and now you're dividing the purse as opposed to collecting it all for yourself. In this case, the Mando will take care of that at the very end. After the door has been blown down by the E-Web blaster, there's actually one mercenary left inside. The Mandalorian kills it, and then they reach the asset.
I had no idea what was coming, first of all. Once they gave a little look at it, my wife started getting giddy, and the boys really were like, "Oh, this is so cool, Baby Yoda!" So the fact that they could potentially end this by killing not only a baby but a Baby Yoda, but I think the Mandalorian has a conscience, and when he was talking to Werner Herzog, the client, you're going to get paid more if it's alive than if it's dead. Awesome ending, wonderful way to finish it off. The child putting up his finger, and the Mandalorian putting his finger down. It was kind of like an ET moment, kind of. That's kind of what went through my mind. So great first episode.
Yeah, there's a deeper connection there, a personal connection, because we know that the Mando is a foundling. And so not only does it benefit the Mando to bring the asset back alive, but this is something that he experienced. There's an empathy there. There's a sympathy. He can relate, and he is shocked by the child and its age. He remarks with it, it's 50 years old, and the IG unit says, "Well, yeah, but different species age differently." So there are a lot of reasons why the Mando does what he does and takes out the IG unit. And to his credit, again, he tries to stop the droid. He says, "No, we're going to bring it in alive." And the IG unit is inflexible due to programming, and so he shoots it in the head. Did you like that you hear the blaster shot, you see the red reflection in the visor, and just for that maybe a split second, did you think that it had happened?
Absolutely. Amazing cinematography right there. I mean, it's great. I mean, you had no clue. I almost wish they would have gone a couple more seconds for you to really process it.
The whole ending, I had no idea. I had heard nothing about the Baby Yoda going into that episode, so I was completely, shocked and surprised by what the asset wound up being. I like Jeff said, that moment where you get the focusing on the Mando's face or helmet, and you see the blast reflection. But even up to the last possible moment, he's trying to be that man of honor and deal with the guild and whatever rules they have about collecting bounties, but the overwhelming compulsion that he has is to protect this thing because he views it as a child, and it's directly related to his own childhood experience and his suffering and the fact that he was adopted and taken in by the Mandalorians, and he was going to try and do the right thing, but now he's gone and killed a member of the guild. Even though it's a robot, he's still gone and now executed basically a coworker. And then that moment at the end, like David said, that's the first thing I thought of too. When both of their fingers went up, I immediately thought ET. But of course, that's a thing for certain people of a certain age, and it could very well be a wink and a nod to Lucas and Spielberg and all of that as well.
Like you guys, I was completely surprised. Disney was exceedingly careful not to show the child. No toys, no merchandise coming out in advance. I want to praise whoever was making the decisions, whether that's Favreau, Filoni, both. Whoever it is at Disney made the decision not to try to monetize the child immediately for dramatic effect, right? For the benefit of the show. I want to offer my appreciation That is not a decision that we often see in today's world. I'm so thankful because I was surprised. I was happy at the end of that first chapter. I was just so excited to see the second.
The Baby Yoda thing has become this, the next great thing in Star Wars that is appealing to everyone and has brought so many people into the fold of Star Wars fandom. This is good Star Wars. This is the Star Wars we love to get. Just this episode in a vacuum, the fact that we are presented with another Yoda, whether it's cloned Yoda or whether it's just a Yodette or whatever they are, like we don't know what the species is, whatever, but it brings up a lot of questions. George Lucas names everything. He gets a bunch of people together to write backstory for everything, fleshing out his entire universe and all of his characters and all their interactions. We've never gotten anything about Yoda prior to Episode 1, when he was only 850 years old, right?
Yeah, no species, no nothing.
Yeah, nothing about what his home planet is, what his species is like, where, are they particularly reclusive, like we don't know. And we get him in the Clone Wars, we get him in the prequel movies, and we get him in Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back, and that's it. Like, Lucas never, and he's talked about it. He's talked about how he likes keeping Yoda mysterious and kind of letting him be this singular anomaly in the Star Wars universe. And now, even, despite what we get, like, we're not even talking about, subsequent episodes of the television show. In that moment where you're revealed there is another one and he's young, or it's young, we don't even know if it's a he, but that there is one and it's young, we have no idea how that would have happened. So now we're starting to ask ourselves larger questions. Not only is who is this individually as a character, and what does this mean to the television show and the arc of the story, but what does it mean in the larger context of the Star Wars universe? Like, are we going to finally get that backstory about Yoda's people and all of that stuff or not? And so there's a distinct possibility that through the life of this television show, even if it isn't in the first season, it could be in one of the subsequent seasons, that we are going to learn a lot more about Yoda and the species. And that's something that's fascinating and interesting to me.
Yeah, if I had to guess, I'd say the mystery will remain. I don't know that the show will give us all of the information that we crave, and perhaps it shouldn't. It has been fun all of these years. The mystery surrounding Yoda is probably better than creating a fully detailed backstory.
But if it's naturally a 50-year-old Yoda, then it's Baby Yoda. Then it was birthed / created, whatever, almost a decade before Episode 1. So now that's going to be a whole nother origin story and a whole nother backstory that we're going to have to deal with at some point in the show, hopefully. Because if they never tell me where it came from, the fans are going to freak out, right? We go through 6 seasons, and the Baby Yoda is part of like maybe 3 of them, but we never find out why. And he shows up like in the season finale for the final season or whatever, and says, "Hey, thanks for saving me, Mando. You're my bruh," and then like that's it. And we never get an answer. Like, the fans will melt.
Yeah, oh, I hear you. One question remains: what did you like most about the episode?
The Ugnaught. I enjoyed his character. Just the interaction that he had, the life coach part. Again, great all around.
It felt like watching this episode. It was the perfect marriage of the great aspects of Western filmmaking and the storytelling in Western films, and what we love so much about Star Wars, and all the things that we've always loved about Star Wars, and the great storytelling, the interesting characters, the fascinating costumes and the species and the aesthetic of all of that. It took to use a video game analogy, it took the skin of Star Wars and put it on the engine of a Western film, and it was fantastic, and it was a perfect marriage. So this episode, like, took all of the fears that I had and all of the concerns that I had, especially after having seen the sequel trilogy and what was going on in cinema with Star Wars, and then, of course, the legacy of televised Star Wars. It took all those fears and it wrapped them up in a nice little package and put them in the garbage and said, don't worry about that anymore because you're going to love this. But this as an intro episode to a television show and as an entry into the canon of Star Wars and into the pantheon of Star Wars, it does not disappoint. It lives up to the legacy, and it just portends great things for the future of Star Wars television.
This is acceptable.
Our discussion of The Mandalorian Chapter 101 has come to an end. Thank you, David.
No problem. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Sean.
I have spoken.
Look for our discussion of Chapter 102 in the coming weeks. If you like the content, please tell others and subscribe to the channel Galactic Initiative. We close with a legal disclaimer. Galactic Initiative is not authorized or endorsed by Lucasfilm Limited. The name Star Wars and all related materials are registered trademarks of Lucasfilm Limited, a subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company, all rights reserved. Galactic Initiative is a registered trademark, and other product and company names are trademarks of their respective holders. Use does not imply affiliation or endorsement. Before you go about your business, remember,
these aren't the droids we're looking for.